so excited to have our guest today, Lora DiCarlo, who is the CEO of a eponymous Sextech company, Lora DiCarlo Inc. And she burst onto the scene, literally like shot out of a cannon. And she'll tell you a little bit about her story, which is really exciting. And as someone who's spent a lot of their time in the space trying to catalyze conversations, she really was a shot in the arm for the whole community in terms of bringing a lot of issues to light.
Well, I would absolutely describe her as the force of nature in the vibrator world. I mean, she really has such a presence about her. And I'm very interested to learn about her products because it seems that her real mission is to make them feel like the human touch. And I think a lot of people will really benefit from that.
Yeah. And one of the things we talk about over and over again, and I always say, I think I've probably quadrupled your practice because every person I speak to, I'm like, oh, I don't care where you live in the world, this has to be your doctor. But I think that it'll be really interesting to see what they're doing in terms of education. And like so many companies in the space have stepped in where either parents or institutions and schools have not given lots of people the tools they need to make choices for their own pleasure.
Well, listen, valid and credible information as part of her website for education is excellent. And listen, vibrators are becoming much more conversational and people are normalizing the conversation, I should say. So they're not the taboo subject that they used to be in the past. So I'm excited to speak to her.
Welcome to the Business of the V. Hello, friends and colleagues. I'm Dr. Alyssa Dweck.
And I'm Rachel Braun Scherl. Each week, we bring you the most fascinating investors, inventors, entrepreneurs, academics, and healthcare practitioners who are making things happen in women's sexual and reproductive health.
If you are a woman, know a woman, have a business, or care about your V health and wellness, fasten your seatbelts and listen in to another informative and inspiring episode.
We are so happy to have our guest today, Lora DiCarlo, who's the CEO of Lora DiCarlo Inc. I've had the pleasure of knowing Lora for a long time. She's a real force as a person and as an entrepreneur in this space. Welcome. We're so glad to have you.
Thank you, Rachel Braun Scherl. Yes, we have known each other for a long time. Kind of like just clicked, like from like the moment I met you. I was like, this bad bitch, I need her in my life.
And when I grow up, I want to be as cool as Lora. So So anyway, so much to talk about. What we love about doing this show is we really talk about the intersection between what Alyssa's seeing in her office, the questions she has, the education she has to provide, and from my perspective, the businesses that we're seeing being created. So you cover all of that. So talk about that pivotal moment. I love this story where you had the idea to start Lora DiCarlo in that one.
Yeah. Ironically, Alyssa, I was on the track to becoming an orthopedic surgeon. And I was also at the same time, like, do I really want to continue? Because I was going to night school, working for two different offices at any given time. Or like, I got 10 years to go. And then one day, I had an orgasm that literally rocked my world so hard that I shuddered right off the side of the bed. It was like an earthgasm.
Wow. An earthgasm. I'm going to use that in my office. Yeah.
Okay. So totally rocked my whole little world, knocked my goofy ass right off the bed. And I still had like one leg hitched up on the bed and I'm laying with my back on the like cold tile floor, just going, oh God, how do I do it again by myself? And I started actually getting really curious, like, well, there must be a product out there that can recreate this experience. What exactly is happening on a physiological level? Like, what are the erogenous zones that are involved here? And when I started looking for the product that could recreate this experience, what had happened was my partner had been stimulating my glans clitoris and then doing that come hither motion on the inside anterior wall of the vaginal canal. So right on the inside, where the fabled G-spot is. And really, like, if you're talking about that, we're really considering almost the entire clitorourethral vaginal complex. We're stimulating the whole damn thing, right where the urethral sponge is. And I nearly blacked out. And lo and behold, there was no product that could actually do that because I was looking for something that felt like a human partner. and also could stimulate both sides at the same time. And then therein, I wanted something that actually fit like my anatomy, and everything I tried and bought, I was like, God, this is a letdown. And so I started trying to figure out like what's going on here, like what data needs to be collected in order to design something that wouldn't just fit me, but could fit multiple different people with different pelvic angles, like the location of the clitoris, the size of the clitoris, the location of the G-spot. Some people are even slightly tilted to one side. And all of these tiny nuanced bits of data had never been collected before. So I started collecting it myself, and that was a really awkward conversation to start. I started asking people, and ultimately after about 2.5, 3 years, I surveyed nearly 200 people, merely out of like just sheer curiosity. How much do we differentiate? Because I was going into medical texts, journals, and I couldn't find any of this. And this is probably 7 or 8 years ago. And I couldn't even find an actual dissection of a real clitoris. It was all like everything that I found at that time, like that was publicly available, was just, MRI possible diagrams. And I was like, well, how do they differentiate? So I started asking all these people, and their reactions were always the same. It was first, they were like super embarrassed, awkward. And then they got really engaged. They were like, nobody ever talks to me about this. And you're not embarrassed about it?
Welcome to the day in my life.
One of the things this is what's so exciting about doing this show. We always hear these experiences that propel people to create businesses. And the people in this space, lightning strikes in very many different ways, and they do amazing things. So like, for instance, the average person would fall out of bed and say, oh, I hit my head. And then go back and you decide you want to create a company. So yeah. Alyssa, I want you, for the people who are not as knowledgeable about the anatomy, explain a little bit about, the basics that people should know and some of the things that Lora is talking about, and whether you see patients have any of this knowledge.
So, just generally, the clitoris is probably the most special organ in a female body, in the sense that it is so heavily innervated with nerves. It has 8,000 nerve endings in a small spot that's like the size of a dime, which is incredibly rich. It has a massively rich blood supply. Therefore, the sensitivity is amazing. What is not always known is exactly what you're speaking about, Lora, which is that the clitoris is not just a little teeny bulb of skin that you see, which is actually just the clitoral hood, a piece of skin that almost mimics the glans penis that covers the tip, which retracts during excitement, but the clitoris is underneath, and then it extends into the labia and into the vagina. So it brings me to a really big point, which is that there's still a whole lot of controversy about whether the G-spot is actually real, or is it just an extension of the clitoris inside the vagina? So this is likely not going to be answered in our lifetimes, but either way, what difference does it make? Because regardless, stimulation feels good no matter where it is along the clitoral anatomy. So hopefully that's a good little primer 101.
Yeah, and I think the other thing to note, a lot of people don't really understand that penile or male physiology, male anatomy, male sexual anatomy, and female sexual anatomy is actually homologous. So, which means, for those of you that don't know, that just means it starts out basically as the same thing, and it splits off and it develops differently. But a lot of the sensations, like the glans penis on the very tip, is the most sensitive part of the penis. So the glans clitoris is the most sensitive part of the clitoris.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the things that you talk about a lot is this, not an idea you made up. Hopefully you're not the only one to ever experience it, but this idea of a blended orgasm. So I want to talk to our doctor friend again and say, do people know what that is? And Lora, do people know what that is? Will they know it when they're experiencing it? And again, I want to go back to, I know the education Alyssa provides in her office, but the role, Lora, you've had to take as well to build your company, which is providing a lot of information that clearly people don't have about their own bodies.
Yeah.
We're not going to find the terms blended orgasm in our medical books. That's just not the way things are explained to us in medical school. Nor are we going to, do our anatomy dissections and say, oh, if this little spot is touched, we're going to see a blended orgasm. If this spot is touched, we won't. The bottom line is the clitoris is fairly large, and there are various spots that provide excellent stimulation. Some women will have orgasms just from direct stimulation. In fact, 70% of women tend to have their orgasmic potential as direct stimulation to the clitoris. Others have erogenous zones that reach orgasm with less obvious places, nipple stimulation, even just visual stimuli or other areas of the body. So that's something that should be kept in mind. There are some people who seem to be able to separate their orgasms as to where they've been stimulated and how it feels after the fact. And power to you if that's your capability. However, most people in real life practice will just describe that one was unbelievable, making me fall off the bed. And that one was a little bit weaker, but still pretty fun. And I would say there lies the difference between maybe a blended unbelievable versus something that's a little more simple. But again, not a medical term.
Generally, like the blended orgasm that I experienced, I actually found reference to this as being like coined as the holy grail of orgasms. When you stimulate the glans clitoris and, the possibly fabled G-spot. But I think the thing to note too is that you can have lots of different kinds of blended orgasms. I'm acutely familiar with an A-spot orgasm blended with a clitoral orgasm. The A-spot is actually the anterior front is perfect. So it's actually very, very deep in the vagina. And if you hit that spot, some people love it. Some people really don't like it at all.
People in my world don't believe that it's an actual anatomic spot, but that's why I say it doesn't really matter.
Yeah.
Because whatever rocks your boat or rocks your world is what you should be involved in, whether it has a name or not. So again, I think that, there's so much that goes into this. It's a nerve supply, blood supply, hormonal milieu, things that are going on in the largest organ of our women's sexual anatomy, which is probably the brain, that all influence orgasmic potential. Keep in mind the people I see in my office are either those who are not achieving orgasm at all or having a very weak response when they used to have a small one. But people such as yourself or whomever is, we're speaking about with blended or other orgasms who are happy, they're not coming in and presenting to me needing advice. So I do see a skewed population.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of why we really encourage our users in our community. Like, one product might not work for you and another product might just blow your socks off. And, that's part of why at Lora DiCarlo, we actually offer as much education as possible because let's be quite frank, like education in the US and, internationally, as far as sexual health education is concerned, is just kind of crap. So like offering coaching, offering white papers, offering community to folks so that they don't feel like there's something wrong with them, that they're broken. And that's one of the biggest things that really just breaks my heart is that there's nothing wrong with you. You just haven't found your way yet. And a lot of the time, finding that way can actually increase your libido, increase your sensationality as you continue to explore the things that your body responds to the most.
Yeah, no question. And some of it is a little bit of a learned response. A lot of it is partner related or not partner related. Certainly whatever background you bring to the table, such as your history,
Yeah.
So
We have a lot of conversations about trauma, about menopause, about how you converse and have conversations and with your partner. And all of that is, I would say, the precursor, the preface to an orgasm anyway. The actual direct stimulation, you could be doing exactly the right thing, but if your head's not in it, it's likely not going to happen.
Also, no question about it. Plus, I'll just add one more thing. Being in the moment is very important. This is a very vulnerable time in a good way when you are reaching a climax. So if you're not comfortable in your environment or with your partner or not trusting, it's not going to happen. And sitting and spectating and saying, is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? Is it going to happen? When is it going to happen? That is definitely not going to help.
So one of the things that Lora spent a lot of time on, and one of the many things we bonded over, is this idea of being part of the conversation, giving people the tools, giving them the information, giving them the vocabulary, giving them the venue to have those conversations. So I'm curious for you, I imagine that you always had way more knowledge than the average girl or gal. Was your sex education somehow different, better? Is this just your innate curiosity that got you here?
Definitely the innate curiosity. And one of the things that we're working on, and this will make sense in a minute, is down along the line, I would love to see basically a kit for younger folks to be able to explore their sexuality, because like many other young girls, I thought the only way I could have an orgasm was to have sex. So I waited as long as I could until I was like, I'm not waiting anymore. So I was an empowered young woman. My mother I thought she was going to kicked out of honors choir when I was in 4th grade, because she was like, you're going to make all the girls wear skirts. Nuh-uh. And I was like, oh, don't get me kicked out. So I was definitely brought up in a very feminine forward, powerful household. But sexual exploration was not really, my mother was open about it, but we didn't really get down deep and dirty. And I didn't really understand how much would have been needed at an earlier stage in life for me to understand that, and to maybe not make some of the decisions that I've made. When I was younger, I actually have had girls as young as 14 reach out to me and verbatim said, all of my friends are having sex. I don't want to. I just want to know what it's like to have an orgasm. And walking that person, and keep in mind, I'm also a certified sexual educator. So I would walk some of these people through, how to explore their bodies. Not like, hey, this is what you do, and this is step 2, this is step 3. It's just encouraging them to explore their sexuality. And then coming back and then, 2 weeks later, and they're like, Lora, I finally had my first orgasm and I feel like a woman for the first time in my life. And I'm like, but what that does is she doesn't feel like she has to go out and have sex just to experience that. And that's something I think is really important in sexual education, is the pleasure factor. Some people in society want to encourage students to remain abstinent, but they don't want them to learn anything about their sexuality. There's a huge problem with that. And that's something that's on my agenda to tackle.
So here's today's hot flash. Women are really unique because they can have multiple orgasms. Some women even claim to have what we call blended orgasms. Now, that is a colloquial term for a clitoral and vaginal orgasm that happen at the same time. How do you approach your actual devices? I mean, I know it's such an amazing assortment. How are they distinguished from all the other stuff that's out there? Tell us a little about how you develop some of these.
We're very experientially focused and data informed. So we don't send anything out into the market that hasn't been thoroughly tested by beta and a larger swath of testers. So when we start our concepting phase, most of the companies in this industry, they have an idea, they send it to a manufacturer, and they don't do anything with the development, or they pick something out of a catalog. And then the manufacturer does all the manufacturing with very little input from the company, and then they send it to market. The way that we work is we actually concept the ideas, and we actually have a full engineering team here in-house. We're here in beautiful Bend, Oregon. It's finally the first sunny day in forever. But we have a full engineering team that we can actually print up our designs, recalibrate, re-innovate, and reprint those designs with even the smallest amount of changes, and go through, as many as 1,000 iterations, which is what we did with OSA 1 and 2, in order to make sure that it's perfect and that we're getting the best experience possible from our testers. And they're not all going to be the same. They're very differentiated products because human beings are very differentiated. But we'll go through and we will recalibrate. We will redo that, redesign those products. And then somewhere in there, we start talking to our manufacturers. And that's when we start involving them in the design to make sure, is this manufacturable? So we start working with them halfway through our design phase, and then all the way through to the end of market. And throughout that entire phase, all the way from concepting the form factor, which is just the shape and the color or whatever, we test those as well. We'll print out something that doesn't work at all, and does it feel good in your hand? Is it ergonomic? Can somebody with arthritis in their wrist use this? Is it approachable? All of these things go into this, but it's also extremely data informed. So we've done several studies year to date that asked people, I think one of our first studies, we asked people, what do you want? What do you find pleasurable? What would your ideal product do? not only that, but how do you communicate with your partner? What are some issues that you have? What are pain points that you have? And essentially, we try to answer those questions with a solution that's driven by our robotics department. So we make products that, yes, we have some products that vibrate, but they also integrate polymer warming technology that we've specified that you don't see in this industry. And we have a lot of products that are biomimetic. And biomimetic just means to mimic biology, whether that's plant, animal, or human, or in our case, a really talented partner.
Well, I also noticed your quiz, which I guess really hones in on what you're learning from your data about, what different people need. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it helps them to make smart choices about the products they want. Because a lot of people are like, "Oh, I want the hero product." It says, "I bet it could do everything for me," but it might not be right for you.
I think some people also say, "Oh, I want the pink one. I want the one that's shaped like an egg roll, whatever it is."
Yeah.
So, in addition to all the work that you've done and the science that you've brought in, we would be remiss to have a conversation with you and not talk about the seminal event at CES that gave you the platform that you have really ascended to. So tell us a little bit about Consumer Electronics Show. It was really fun to have a front row seat literally on the ground when that happened and the impact that had on your business.
Yeah. So right after I founded the company, I kicked off an industry-funded research program with Oregon State University. And they happen to be the top 4 robotics graduate program in the country. And we went to work designing our first product, OSE. And within about 8 months, we actually had a prototype. We had a proof of concept, and we had filed for 5 patents. So when we did this, we decided, okay, we need at least another year to get through the manufacturing phase and get it to market. So while we're doing this, let's start applying for awards for strategic marketing angles because this is really, really innovative. And so the first award we applied for is literally the biggest technology award in the world. It's the Consumer Electronics Show run by the Consumer Technology Association. It's literally almost 200,000 attendees attend this conference in person, except for when it's a pandemic, and nearly 5,000 exhibitors. So it spans over acres and acres of Las Vegas. If you get one of these awards, it could totally make your company. The problem is they hand out these awards, and most of these companies, because it's mostly just technologists that go to this show, these people know that product's not going to be available until next year. So we applied, and we didn't think we would get it. We were just like, we need to, start cutting our teeth at applying for these awards. And a month later, we got a notification that, wow, this is really innovative. This is very different. It's robotic. It's thoughtfully engineered. Here's your award in robotics. You get an honorary innovation award in robotics from the biggest technology association in the world. And I lost my mind. I went and started raising money so that we could be at the show. I started hiring PR companies. I started hiring our first marketing experts in-house. And then about a month later, and all of this was under embargo because they weren't going to announce the winners until months later when they had gotten the show ready to go. About a month later, they send us a message that says, "Oh, we noticed that this is an adult product." This spawned a conversation that went up the chain of administrators, not the judges. And the administrators decided that, to quote our legalese, we can't allow a product or a company that we believe to be immoral, obscene, or profane at our show. And we went,
"Oh my goodness.
What?"
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't realize that sexual health and wellness was obscene. And so we countered and we talked about all of the things that, were really gender biased at their show, about, the fact that they'd had booth babe problems for nearly 30 years. They actually had a product that was geared towards male sexuality. It was actually a VR porn company that was showing on the show floor. You could go walk through CES, put on a VR headset, and watch porn. And not only that, but in 2017 and 2018, leading up to this show that we just won this award for, there hadn't been one single female keynote speaker for 2 years. Keep in mind how big this show is. And their reasoning was that, well, there just aren't enough high-level C-suite executives at big companies that are worthy of speaking at our show. And I went, "Oh, would you like to open your mouth a little wider so you can jam your foot in a little deeper?" And so we kept going back and forth with them. And ultimately, they told us they were banning us from the show. And so we decided to put together a strategy around and release this to the press under embargo. So on the day that the show went live, we lifted our embargo with the press and started running this campaign around the gender bias at the show. And we ended up with nearly 5,000 pieces of coverage in the first 2 years, just about the fight that we were pursuing. And it was such bad press for them that within a few months, they actually contacted me and said, "Can we talk?" And at this point, I had gone from being a dork in the lab to an overnight international motivational speaker, speaking at like TechCrunch Disrupt, Forbes, all over the world. And so we sat down with them and they said, the first thing that Gary Shapiro, the president of the CTA, said was, "We made a big mistake. We should have never taken your award away. We owe you a big apology." And at that moment, we realized they want to give our award back. They want a public mea culpa. And so we said, "Look, yeah, we understand that you might want to give our award back, but the fact is we don't need it anymore with the amount of press that we've got. And this has really helped us to shift and mold our mission and have a really important conversation." So I think what's even more important is that we actually invite Sextech to your show and we'll help you write your policies around this. Because the fact is, and I asked Gary Shapiro very pointedly, if it's truly solving a problem, if it's tastefully and respectfully done and marketed and designed, if it's really innovative and it's not objectifying human bodies, shouldn't it be at your show? And he couldn't really argue with that. So we rewrote their policies and now sexual health and wellness is a part of the health and wellness category at large at CES. And that was really cool to see because what that does is not only one, yes, it's right, but two, it helps to normalize the conversation around sex. You walk through such a big show like that through the health and wellness space and you're like, oh, there's sleep tech, there's fit tech, there's diet tech, there's sex tech, there's sex tech. That's cool.
Well, they did you a huge favor in hindsight. So that's the way it works out, right?
It was really remarkable and had a huge impact on your ability to fundraise. It had a huge impact on your sales. So all of that is amazing. And speaking of making a big splash, you made another strategic decision when you brought on a celebrity as your partner or co-creator. Talk a little bit about the thought process and what is actually happening with your partnership with Cara Delevingne.
At the time that they reached out, we didn't ever really think that we would need any kind of celebrity endorsement. It was never on the strategic path for us. They actually reached out to us and said, Cara has been looking for a brand to work with that really is on the same level as her personal brand, which is very outspoken, it's very authentic, and it's very sex positive. And she couldn't find anything, but we hadn't launched yet. So her agents found us through the CES debacle and said, "Cara, take a look at this." And she said, "Oh my God, that's it." And so I met her and we just really clicked. She's very authentic. She's an absolute sweetheart. Was really interested in design and how the products are designed and how does she help us get that word out and really help to continue to destigmatize the conversation around sexuality. And so we launched that in, I think it was November 2020 when we started our pre-sale. It has been going, it's been going hard since. So she, if anybody knows Cara Delevingne, she's very outspoken and she's a little wacky sometimes, but she's an absolute darling and just really believes in, there's two things that she can really get behind. That's environmental issues and it's sex positivity. And so having her behind us and behind the mission has been really nice.
Sounds like CES really was the gift that kept on giving. So congrats on that. So what's coming down the pipe for Lora DiCarlo?
So two things. Right now, we're in the middle of our first Series A raise, which has been kind of crazy. So we're actually into year 2 since launch. We've launched 15 products since then. And what we're doing now is really kind of taking a holistic approach to solutions for sexual health and wellness. So that's no longer just the device category. You've seen that, I talked a little bit about the fact that we do white papers, we do studies, we do education, coaching. And the other piece is offering a consumables line that complements those products like lubes, tinctures. We have a CBD lube out that it took us 8 months to formulate with a chemist. And the last part that is really important to us is the medical arm. So I actually work with several different medical doctors, pelvic floor therapists, OBGYNs, and a lot of them, the reason this actually got spurned on is because they reached out to us and said, your products, I think, could actually help to solve a lot of sexual dysfunction issues. Can we carry your line in office? And so they actually carry those lines in their office and they work through, a lot of those issues with their patients. They get, they also get a discount code too if they're getting it through their doctor. And then the thing I'm really excited about right now is we just launched a new product. It's in pre-sale right now, and it's called Carva. And it's basically a V2 of Onda. A lot of people have accused of us of being like the Apple of Sextech, just because our packaging is so good and, the innovation and the technology that goes into it is so good. And now we're doing V2s. This product is it's ergonomically shaped so that you can actually push forward on the handle if it's inserted and you get a more intense sensation. It's very quiet. And you have the option of vibrational intensity that can be used on the P spot, or the G spot. I literally, when we were in our earliest concept phases and we had our first working unit that I tested, I lost my mind. I called the team and I was like, of all the things I've ever put in my vagina, this one was the best. And they were like, noted. Okay, thanks. I'm like, yeah, okay. So
it reminds me of, Lora, what you said. I remember when people used to talk about when they were doing the clinical studies for Viagra and a man would have an impact from the product he was given. And he'd call his doctor at 3 a.m. and said, I'm pretty sure I'm in the one where you give them the actual drug. I'm not on the placebo.
Yeah, exactly. So we're kind of just creating a very holistic platform right now. And we've got some new products that are coming down the pipeline. Some really cool, innovative stuff. And recently I've done some restructuring at the company. So we're very finely tuned to really, really start to scale. So right now we're in the Series A, and we're focused on growth and seeing how much the company can grow, given adequate resourcing and funding. And then we're going to take another look at that and see how much we can grow our platform. And that might even include acquiring other smaller companies to kind of fill in the spaces and be that holistic approach in a very safe community.
Amazing. Well, we wish you the very best. It's been a pleasure to speak.
And you don't have to worry that you'll keep the energy up, making noise and making things happen. Great to see you.
It's great to see you, Rachel. It was really nice to meet you, Alyssa.
You as well.
Don't forget, subscribe to our podcast at businessofthev.com for the latest trends and trendsetters in women's health and business.